The call that changed everything. The evening air hung thick with humidity as Brigadier General Patricia Williams stepped out of her silver sedan in the parking lot of the downtown shopping center. At 52 years old, she carried herself with the dignified bearing that came from 3 decades of military service. Her shoulders straight, despite being dressed in civilian clothes, a simple navy blazer and khaki pants. She had just finished a routine meeting with local community leaders about veteran outreach programs, her mind already shifting to the stack of Pentagon reports waiting on her desk at home. The shopping center was nearly empty at 8:30 on a Tuesday evening, most stores preparing to close within the hour. Patricia needed to pick up a prescription from the pharmacy and grab groceries for the week ahead. As she walked across the asphalt, her phone buzzed with a text from her daughter Sarah, a captain serving in Afghanistan. "Hope your meeting went well, Mom. Talk tomorrow?" Patricia smiled, tucking the phone back into her purse. She never noticed the police cruiser that had been trailing her for the past 6 blocks. Officer Derek Matthews sat behind the wheel, his partner Jake Rodriguez riding shotgun. Matthews had been on the force for 8 years, Rodriguez for 12, and both carried the swagger of men who believed their badges gave them carte blanche to act on their prejudices. They had spotted Patricia's expensive car and made assumptions about how a black woman could afford such luxury. "Probably dealing drugs," Matthews muttered to Rodriguez, who nodded in agreement. "Let's see what she's up to." They had no probable cause, no reasonable suspicion, nothing but the color of Patricia's skin and their own twisted worldview. As Patricia emerged from the pharmacy with her prescription bag, they made their move. "Ma'am, stop right there!" Matthews barked, stepping out of the cruiser with his hand resting on his weapon. Rodriguez flanked her from the other side, both officers approaching with the aggressive posture they reserved for what they considered suspects. Patricia turned, confused, but compliant. "Good evening, officers. Is there a problem?" "We need to see some identification," Matthews demanded, his voice dripping with barely concealed hostility. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area." Patricia maintained her composure, reaching slowly for her purse. "Of course. May I ask what kind of suspicious activity?" "Just produce the ID, lady," Rodriguez snapped. "Save the questions." She handed over her military identification card and driver's license. Matthews barely glanced at them before shoving them into his pocket. "We're going to need to search your vehicle and your person. Step away from the car and put your hands on the hood." "Officers, I believe there's been some misunderstanding," Patricia said calmly, though her heart rate was climbing. "I'm Brigadier General Patricia Williams, United States Army. I was simply running errands." Matthews laughed harshly. "Right, and I'm the president. Lady, I don't care what costume you're wearing or what fake ID you've got. You're acting suspicious, and we're going to find out why." "Sir, that identification is genuine. I serve at the Pentagon and—" "Shut up and assume the position," Rodriguez shouted, grabbing Patricia's arm and forcing her toward the car. "Stop resisting." Patricia wasn't resisting. She stood perfectly still as they roughly searched her, their hands invasive and disrespectful. Other shoppers had begun to gather, some recording with their phones, others simply staring in shock. The humiliation burned through her, but she knew that any sudden movement, any sign of anger, could escalate the situation dangerously. "Check the car," Matthews ordered Rodriguez, who began rifling through Patricia's vehicle without a warrant, without consent, without any legal justification whatsoever. "Officers, please," Patricia tried once more, her voice steady despite the rage building inside her. "Call the Pentagon. Verify my credentials. This is a serious mistake." "The only mistake here is thinking you can run drugs through our jurisdiction," Matthews snarled, pulling out his handcuffs. "You're under arrest for suspicious behavior and failure to comply with police orders." The cold metal bit into Patricia's wrists as Matthews cuffed her hands behind her back, tightening them deliberately beyond necessity. The small crowd of onlookers had grown, many now openly filming the arrest. Patricia held her head high, even as tears of fury and humiliation threatened to spill down her cheeks. "This is unlawful detention," she said clearly, ensuring her voice carried to the recording devices. "I am a general in the United States Army. I demand you contact the Pentagon immediately to verify my identity." Yeah, you and every other drug dealer with delusions of grandeur," Rodriguez mocked, joining his partner after finding nothing suspicious in Patricia's immaculate vehicle. "Come on, General, let's take a ride downtown." They shoved her into the back of the police cruiser, her head banging against the doorframe as they forced her inside. The plastic seat was sticky and reeked of disinfectant and fear. As they drove toward the police station, Patricia's mind raced through her options, her training kicking in despite the shock of the situation. At the station, they processed her like any common criminal, taking her fingerprints, her photograph, confiscating her personal effects. The desk sergeant, a woman in her 40s named Linda Torres, looked uncomfortable with the proceedings but said nothing. Patricia was placed in a holding cell that smelled of urine and despair, the fluorescent lights humming overhead like angry insects. It was nearly 11 o'clock when they finally allowed her the phone call she had been requesting for over 2 hours. Patricia didn't hesitate. She dialed a number that fewer than 50 people in the entire country had memorized, the direct line to the Pentagon's Emergency Operations Center. "Pentagon Emergency Operations. This is Colonel Harrison." "Colonel, this is Brigadier General Patricia Williams, service number 7742198. I need immediate verification of my identity and status. I'm being unlawfully detained by local police." There was a moment of stunned silence. Colonel Harrison knew Patricia personally. She was one of the Army's most respected intelligence officers, currently overseeing critical Middle East operations. "General Williams? Ma'am, what's your location?" Patricia provided the details quickly and efficiently. Within minutes, the Pentagon's machinery was in motion. Calls were made to the Chief of Staff of the Army, to the Secretary of Defense, to the Mayor's office, and to the Commissioner of Police. By 11:45, the phone at the precinct was ringing incessantly. Captain Robert Chen, the night watch commander, answered the fourth call with growing dread. "This is Captain Chen." "Captain, this is General Michael Foster, Deputy Chief of Staff of the Army. You are currently holding one of our general officers on what I'm told are completely fabricated charges. You have exactly 10 minutes to release Brigadier General Williams and ensure she receives a formal apology, or this becomes a federal incident that will end careers." Chen's blood ran cold. He had been a cop for 25 years and had never had the Pentagon calling his precinct. He immediately pulled Patricia's file and saw the notation that Matthews had dismissed her military ID as fake. His hands were shaking as he personally walked to the holding cell. "General Williams," he said quietly, keys in hand. "Ma'am, I am so sorry. There's been a terrible mistake." Patricia stood slowly, her dignity intact despite the ordeal. "Captain, this wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate act of racial profiling and abuse of power by your officers." Within an hour, Patricia was released with her belongings and a stammered apology from Captain Chen. But the real reckoning was just beginning. The videos from the shopping center had already gone viral on social media, showing a decorated military officer being handcuffed and humiliated by officers who refused to believe her credentials simply because of her race. The Pentagon's response was swift and uncompromising. By dawn, a full investigation was underway, not just into the arrest but into the entire police department's practices. The Army's Public Affairs Office released a statement expressing outrage at the treatment of one of their senior officers, and the Secretary of Defense personally called Patricia to apologize on behalf of the government. Matthews and Rodriguez were suspended pending investigation before the sun rose. Their body camera footage, which they had forgotten to turn off during the illegal search and arrest, provided damning evidence of their conduct. The audio captured their racist assumptions, their dismissal of Patricia's military credentials, and their complete disregard for proper police procedure.
The investigation revealed a pattern of similar behavior. 17 other complaints had been filed against Matthews in the past 2 years, mostly by people of color who claimed harassment and illegal searches. Rodriguez had 14 such complaints. The department's Internal Affairs Division had buried most of them, never conducting thorough investigations. Within 2 weeks, both officers were terminated and faced federal charges for violating Patricia's civil rights under color of law. Captain Chen, who had overseen the culture that allowed such behavior to flourish, was demoted and reassigned. The desk sergeant who had processed Patricia without question was suspended without pay. The Department of Justice opened a comprehensive investigation into the entire police force, implementing federal oversight that would last for years. The mayor, facing public outrage and pressure from Washington, fired the police commissioner and instituted mandatory bias training for all officers. Patricia, meanwhile, returned to her duties at the Pentagon, where her colleagues treated her with even greater respect than before. She had handled an impossible situation with grace and dignity, never losing her composure even as she was being criminally mistreated. Her phone call that night had indeed destroyed careers, the careers of those who deserved to lose them. The incident became a catalyst for broader police reform in the city. New protocols were established for verifying credentials, especially for military personnel. Body cameras became mandatory and could no longer be turned off during police interactions. A civilian oversight board was created to review all complaints of misconduct. 3 months later, Patricia received a handwritten letter from Linda Torres, the desk sergeant who had processed her arrest. "General Williams," it read, "I want you to know that watching your dignity and strength that night changed something in me. I should have spoken up. I should have verified your credentials myself instead of trusting Matthews and Rodriguez. I've enrolled in law school and plan to become a civil rights attorney. Thank you for showing me what courage really looks like." Patricia kept that letter on her desk at the Pentagon, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was hope for change. Her arrest had been an injustice, but her response had sparked something larger, a reckoning with systemic racism that had been long overdue. The 2 officers who had destroyed their own careers through their hatred and prejudice now faced federal prison time. Matthews was sentenced to 3 years for civil rights violations, Rodriguez to 2.5. They had lost their jobs, their pensions, their reputations, and their freedom, all because they couldn't see past the color of Patricia's skin to recognize the decorated general standing before them. Patricia continued to serve her country with distinction, eventually being promoted to Major General before retiring with full honors. She never spoke publicly about the arrest, preferring to let her service record and the justice that followed speak for themselves. But privately, she knew that her one phone call had done more than destroy careers. It had helped bend the arc of justice just a little bit closer to fairness for everyone who came after her.